Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arini Habibatun Nisa, NIM T 2018-6086. Here I will explain about qualitative research. There are several explanations from experts about qualitative research approach, which is from Creswell. Explaining five approach is the first is narrative research, and the second is phenomenology, and the third is current theory, and the fourth is ethnography, and the last is case study. And in this book, some qualitative study approach are described, and I will try to explain some of my understanding of the qualitative research approach. This book focuses on the 8 most common approach to qualitative research. And it's also worth remembering that there is a growing variety of approach to qualitative studies. And students are encouraged to review the more detailed text for a more thorough discussions of this and other qualitative approach. And for the general approach is the first is basic qualitative studies. Basic qualitative or interpretive research is also called basic interpretive studies and provide descriptions, target, and understanding a particular phenomenon, process, or point of view from the perspective of those involved. And the main purpose of this study is to understand the world or other people's experience. For example, the basic questions asked are how events, process, and activities are felt by the participants. Usually, researchers use an interview or observations process to complete this research. These interpretive studies are simpler than other qualitative approach. They are not limited to certain phenomena as in case study. And the second is case studies. It is explained here that this study emerged from the approach of business law and medicines. This case study focused on one unit resulting in a rich and holistic in-depth descriptions. Units can be individuals or groups or seats or classes, policies, programs, or institutional process or communications. Example of underlying question are what are the characteristics of the entity or phenomenon, person, or setting. These case studies usually cover various sources of data collected over time. And case studies can answer descriptive questions or what happened, or try to explain why something happened by looking at a process. This study is particularistic, which focus on certain phenomena, situations, or events. Descriptive is give rich, put results. Meanwhile, heuristics focus on providing new insight units defined within certain boundaries, what is called a limited system. For phenomena can be identified in a certain context. If it cannot be explained in such a way, this case study may not be the best approach to study case studies. In some ways, not just how the phenomenon it is studied. It is about what choice to examine. The end result of this research is also called a case study. The greatest advantage of a case study is that it can understand the whole case in its totality of the environment, not only of individual actions, but also of their past. And the third is content or document. Content or document analysis. Content or document analysis is a research method applied to written or visual material for the purpose of identifying certain characteristics of the material. The material analyzed in the form of textbooks, newspapers, and the others. And content analysis is widely used in education. Some of the objectives of content analysis in education are first is to identify bias, prejudice, or propaganda in textbooks. The second is to analyze types of errors in students' writing. And the third is to describe prevailing practice. And the fourth is to discover the level of difficulty of material in textbooks or other publications. And then to discover the relative importance of or interest in certain topics. Content analysis can be done within an emerging design framework, or it can be done within a quantitative research framework with the variables determined prior and the numbers generated to support the researcher for a particular variable. The advantage of this analysis is its unobtrusive nature. The presence of an observer doesn't affect what is being observed and is easy to replicate. Okay, and the fourth is ethnographic studies. Ethnographic is the in-depth study of behavior that occur naturally, culture and behavior, with culture referring to the beliefs, values, concepts, practice, and common attitudes of a particular group of people. The example of basic questions are discussed in ethnographic is like, what are the cultural patterns and perspectives of this group in its natural setting? Usually, observation is a means of collections, primary data, as well as interviews. Ethnographic research has advantage and disadvantage. The main advantage of which is its observations of behavior in real life environments. The research methodology steps in order ethnographic is the first is selecting an ethnographic projects, and the second is um, uh, asking ethnographic questions, and the third is collecting ethnographic data, and the fourth is making an ethnographic record, and then analyzing ethnographic data, and last is writing the ethnographic. And, and number five is grounded theory studies. Ground theory has its roots in sociology. Its goal is to inductively build a theory about a practice or phenomenon using interviews and observation as the primary data collection tools. This emphasis on theory distinguishes it from other qualitative approaches. This research approach focuses on collecting data about people's experience in a particular context. The theory is grounded in the data and conceptually dense. That is, it presents many conceptual relationships that are stated as propositions pertaining to a particular context, situations, or experience. Ground theory moves beyond descriptions to generate or discover a theory that emerges from the data and that provides an explanations of a process, actions, or interactions. And the number six is historical studies. Historical studies are oriented to the past rather than to the present, and thus use different data collection methods from those used in other qualitative approaches. And historical research is included in qualitative research because of its emphasis on interpretation and its use of non-numeric data. Historical research is the attempt to establish facts and arrive at conclusions concerning the past. The historian systematically locates, evaluates, and interprets evidence from which people can learn about the past. Based on the evidence gathered, conclusions are drawn regarding the past, so as to increase knowledge of how and why past events occurred and the process by which the past become the present. The desired result is increased an understanding of the present and a more rational basis for making choice. The first is primary and secondary source. The historian classifies materials as primary and secondary source. Primary source are original documents, correspondence, diaries, and reports. With secondary source, the mind of a non-observer comes between the event and the user of the record. If a newspaper reporter has been present at a school boarding meeting, the published report is a primary source. If the report relies on the minutes of the meeting or an interview with participants to prepare the report, then the published report is a secondary source. Common example of secondary research are history books, article in encyclopedia, and reviews of research. Historians seek to employ primary research whenever possible. And the second is external and internal criticism. Two ideas that have proved useful in evaluating historical source are the concepts of external or lower critics and internal or higher critics. And the seventh is narrative research. Narrative research has its roots in different humanities disciplines and focus on stories, or spoken or written, told by individuals about lives. A narrative can be any text or discourse. Narrative research provides accounts of human experiences by collecting and analyzing stories about lives. The stories are accounts of events and actions chronologically connected. Narrative research evolved from diverse disciplines in the humanities such as literature, art, and film, as well as from disciplines such as psychology and sociology. And the eighth is phenomenological research. A phenomenological study is designed to describe and interpret an experience by determining the meaning of the experience as perceived by the people who have participated in it. What is the experience of an activity or concept from the perspective of particular participants? That is the question in phenomenology. The central research questions aims to determine the essence of the experience perceived by the participants. Phenomenology moves from individual experience to a universal essence and always asks what is the nature or meaning of the something. Interviewing multiple individuals is the typical data collections approach. Okay, and the last is other types of qualitative research. There are more approaches than we can mention here, but we discuss a few of notes. And the first is portraiture. That form of qualitative research that seeks to join science and art in attempt to describe a complex human experience within an organizational culture. And the second is critical research, seeks to empower change through examining and critiquing assumptions. Questions focus on power relationships and the influence or race. And the third is feminist research and participatory research. Are sometimes classified and critical research. Some researchers for more informations on this approach include Karspikens text on critical ethnography. And the fourth is semiotics and discourse analysis. Study linguistic unit to examine the relationship between words and their meaning. Okay, I think enough from me, and I'm so sorry if I have many mistakes in my explanation. And the last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.